The president also said, America's elections are rigged, stolen, and a laughing stock all over the world. We are either going to fix them or we won't have a country any longer. I am asking all Republicans, big part of the problem, I'll add. President continues, I'm asking all Republicans to fight for the following: Save America Act, which is, you know where that's going. 2, all voters must show voter ID, identification, what a concept. And 3, all voters must show proof of United States citizenship to register for voting. And the president concludes in this post, no mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military, or travel. And as Juan has stated, perhaps part of President Trump's legacy will be, and there's Juan, he's joined us, thank goodness for that. Love to have him weigh in on this. Juan has stated perhaps part of President Trump's legacy will be restoring sound money and free and fair elections. Some on the other side, and a few, but even still some on our side, say, let's move on from the 2020 election like it doesn't matter. That's like, in my opinion, ignoring that narrative is like ignoring evidence of election fraud because the election is already over, is like ignoring a murder because the victim is already dead. We're going to start with Matt Meck, who's been a lot of work on the election issue. Then we'll take it to Juan O Savin. Thank you, Juan, for joining us. And then we'll close out the election issue with Brigadier General Blaine Holt. Matt, you work very much on voter integrity on a coalition. President Trump's executive order, he said an emergency act may be done. Will that be delayed in court? Please unpack this election thing from your seat, sir, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck.
I think, let me break it down a couple of different things. I know you're going to see the classification, probably by Trump, might be by Tulsi, but probably by Trump, talk about unprecedented, significant foreign intrusion into our elections. And I'm not just talking about the machines, the tabulation. I'm talking about voter registration, voter validation, the e-poll books, if you will. I'm talking about tabulation, the counting the machines, and the reporting, going out and getting results at all 4 phases. It's been infiltrated and manipulated. You're going to hear about unprecedented foreign interference into our election system. That will be coming. Number 2 is, I know the president's preference is to codify as much as possible into law, i.e., you have to prove U.S. citizenship to register to vote. Or I would say, you might even say, re-registering folks, that you have to prove you're U.S. citizen. You then have to show voter ID when you are voting to show who you are, who you say you are. And then, of course, limiting any of the mail-in ballots. So that he's trying to do. I know also that there is a declaration of what I've been told, a declaration he will make, which then gives the president broad powers. And I believe it was called the Ohio case, Truman and U.S. Steel or something. And when the president is taking action in ways that aren't specifically delineated in the Constitution, but the Congress has already passed legislation that gives the president authority to do things. In the case of a national emergency, people would normally think of that like nuclear war. This was that back in the Cold War, but this also applies to this. I think you're going to see a combination. If he can't get the SAVE Act through Senator Mitchell's blocking mechanism, and sad today, earlier, he had people whispering in his ears to tell him what to say at a press conference. I think you're going to see the president make a declaration, a national emergency declaration on our elections because of foreign interference and the domestic accomplices of folks who also were engaged in that foreign interference. And they have a list. They know who some of those actors were. So I guess breaking it down, you're going to see a revealing foreign interference in our election, significant way, intrusion into all four domains of our election ecosystem. You're going to see President Trump with a declaration, followed with an executive order to that declaration, is what I've been told, to implement, hopefully, most of that. If the Senate can get its head out of its ass, they can pass the Save America Act, and then you'll see this declaration EO to implement what wasn't in the Save Act or in total to do it. But I can tell you from somebody who knows Trump very, very, very well, close friends, very close friends, he said, I'm quoting, Trump understands if machines are used in the 2026 election, it will be stolen, it will be rigged. We lose the House, we lose the Senate, he gets impeached, he gets convicted, he goes to jail, his family goes to jail, probably his grandkids go to jail, and we all go to jail. And I'm talking about jail in a mass way. Look at Susan Rice. Look at her little dithering on social media earlier today, where she's talking about, we are going to basically take vengeance on you, you corporations and so forth who bended a knee to Trump. We're not going to forget. We're coming for you. This is what's on the horizon if Trump doesn't do this. And based on going back to what General Holt said, he is the man for the season, and he can do this, and he knows he has to do this. He just hopefully isn't blocked or muted or stifled, John, by some on his staff.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to stay with you for a moment, Matt, with a couple of follow-ups because you've got a lot on this, and I appreciate it. We'll go to Juan O Savin and General Holt in a moment. If I understood that correctly, well, clearly the Save America Act, in my humble opinion, probably is not going to make it through the Senate the way we'd like. And it seems the president has some, as you stated, just a follow-up question for clarity. With the quotes I read from the president on those public posts a moment ago, and with what you just said, our safety net, for lack of a better word, is the president will, not outside of his authorized powers, he will be able to override this and see that we have free and fair elections. But we would prefer to go through the standard process, which is the Senate. Quick question, Matt. How important right now, since we know the system is completely corrupt, how important are we're all focused on the midterms, and rightly so. How important are the primaries right now, and what concerns do you have there?
I would argue the primaries in some way are more important than the general, because the primary is how the uniparty gets their candidate into position with an R or a D by their name. So, we got primaries going on. Early voting right now is going on in Texas, right, for the March 3rd ballot. But to your point, John, yeah, I would argue I don't know if it's just because we couldn't move fast enough. I mean, Juan's in this group and so forth, we had put out something, been requested by folks in the administration. We had put out something, ironically, 17 pages long, a proposed follow-on EO to Trump's first EO on election integrity that explained all this. We gave it to them in April of last year. We would have liked to see it earlier for the primaries. We didn't get there. We're not there. But my argument to you back is that, yes, the primaries are at least equally as important, because that is where the uniparty selects, manipulates to get their person into position.
Thank you, sir. We've got Juan O Savin. Thank you, Juan, for jumping through hoops and being able to join us here. Man needs no introduction. Juan, you've been listening. We're talking about elections. You're stated on the record saying that one of Trump's legacies, besides restoring sound money, will be restoring free and fair elections, first here at home and then exporting that throughout the world. How would you like to weigh in, Juan, on the election narrative? Because it is very important, as you well know, sir.
Well, and by the way, I apologize. I had a board meeting. One of the things that I have to do as a responsibility, and somebody called for it earlier today, and I needed to do that, and it took a little longer than I expected. But so I wasn't trying to miss this appointment. But the one thing I'd add to what Matt said a moment ago, which is, in addition to everything he mentioned, cleaning up the elections, it's also about the ballots, specifically, precisely foreign interference in the form of printed ballots, printed in China and imported into the U.S., beyond the electronic and everything else. So there's foreign interference on lots of different levels. And then with collusion internally, and I'll be direct and say it, that um, Mr. Brennan, former CIA director, is in the crosshairs, and there's things happening right now that he certainly is aware of, and that one of the first dominoes to fall in order to establish this foreign interference and domestic participation by people in a position to influence the outcome of the election is going to be shown, and Brennan's going to be right in the middle of all of this. And once it's like shifting sands. You know, if you ever stood on the beach and a really strong wave is going out and coming back in and going out, when you try to stand in one place, that water will just erode the sand under your feet. And you got to kind of get a moment where you got to get balance, rearrange, readjust in order to keep standing. These people that have been involved in this election interference in all sorts of different ways and managing that are going to feel the sand moving under their feet with things that are about to happen. And as they see one person go and then another and then another, their ability to hold up in this situation is going to go away. Their ability to manipulate moving forward the elections is going to go away. With that in mind, certainly we have what we've done with the proposed executive order. It can't do the job by itself. We know from President Trump's executive order last March 25th, which was the 107th executive order signed at 1:07 in the afternoon. With that in place, which amongst other things precisely ordered that the states and the counties clean up the voter rolls around the country. And virtually nothing happened. It was a very precise executive order, gave them 180 days to clean up the voter rolls, the people that are registered to vote. No more, 2-3 different variations of your name or 100. No voting from vacant lots, from out of state addresses, things like that. Nothing happened. So the problem is an executive order alone is not sufficient to solve the problem. And as we saw from President Trump's office, and everybody should take this to heart to understand what I'm going to say in a moment, President Trump issued a pardon to Tina Peters as a federal pardon, presidential pardon. The state of Colorado, the governor of Colorado, chose not to recognize that. It's actually seditious. It's an insurrectionist type act to defy the authority of the president in this kind of a situation going into the state's activities. There's 1,000 issues related to Tina's case that are going on. But at the end of the day, the states are challenging the federal authority to be involved in many things, including, by the way, it's an election-related matter in Tina Peters' case. That's why, as a prelude in this executive order proposal that we have before the president that's been there for 10 months, uh, the one that I saw prior to the election in 2024 that was proposed was not in any way adequate to the task. And that's why the day after the inauguration, during a meeting out in D.C., I asked others if they could help put this together. And they did. It's spectacular. Within the coalition, we have just amazing, amazing people and came up with something that's really intricately beautiful and precise. That's what the White House is looking at. President Trump referenced that he had attorneys reviewing the details a couple months back when he said, I'm getting ready to sign an executive order related to these things. The attorneys have it right now and they're going through it. Well, I believe it was, this specific matter, what we had with our proposed executive order that he was reviewing. With that in mind, the only way to get absolute action on that executive order, which was proven that an executive order by itself is not adequate to the task by the 107th executive order, is to declare a national emergency. And within the context of that national emergency, that it is of such a nature, of such a gravity, that the enforcement of it has to be done federally under a continuity in government type of premise, that without some type of policing power to force implementation, that it would not be adequate to the task. And so there's a recognition that in this case, one thing that people have to understand, an attack on the vote, on the putting in place of leadership within a country through a fraudulent vote, is by international law considered the same as a nuclear attack. It's a weapon of mass destruction. A biological attack, it's a weapon of mass destruction. So in an international court, if you're reacting to an attack that's a WMD type attack, an attack on elections is the same as a nuclear strike or a biological attack. An attack on elections is a WMD. Therefore, a military response, a national emergency situation exists that we have to respond to, not with policing powers merely, something aimed internal, but the president declares it as a national emergency, changes hats from the chief of police hat aimed internally to the commander-in-chief's hat aimed at an enemy attack, which then implements military grade responses and authorizes use of military tools in order to protect the people and the contract between the people and the government, which is the Constitution, from an enemy attack from outside the country. This was an attack implemented by other countries and leadership in other countries and persons based outside of the United States on the leadership inside the United States in the form of false elections, putting people into power who are not the will of the American people. A national security emergency exists because if those people get into power and hold power, they can do things that kill people, that break things, that change the order, the balance of power in the world, a la 2020. When Biden was put in power as the president, things happened such as Ukraine. Things happened all across the world that lots of people died, lots of money was spent and misspent. And therefore, now America is in the balance. We're in a precarious situation. In order to maintain continuity in governance, you have two choices. You can try to maintain it from an internal side with proper policing, but it's an enemy attack from outside. The policing powers aren't adequate. There is an argument that the continuity in government operations should go to those that protect continuity in government between elected administrations. Who has that power? And it's by executive order under Jimmy Carter. It's the Senior Executive Service, helping to maintain continuity between elected administrations and government across the country to keep a flow going, keep the lights on, keep things happening. However, when it's an attack from outside the US, that triggers certain protocols, which in this case go back to the 1954 code, which was put in place as nuclear weapons came online, and protocols that we have to follow using such a tremendous, massive response capability to these huge weapons of mass destruction, nuclear and beyond. And within that continuity, NORAD and these military systems have the authority to protect the people and, by extension, the Constitution, the contract between the people and their government, against a WMD attack that could destroy the country and allow people to take power within the country and control the country, for example, as an occupying army or through mischief. And it's even so broad as to include the concept that aliens could come from outer space and try to take over the country, and we have to somehow maintain the legal authority of the people within the United States, living within the boundaries of the Constitution, to protect themselves from an attack and to re-establish a proper order of elected authority over their country and their lives. With that in mind, that's exactly what President Trump, the premise that he's working under. We've been attacked internationally. The proper authority to respond isn't senior executive service exclusively, who in fact Trump is actually in its main fight with in many ways, a very captured operation by the Globalista, by the way, tied into operations in Britain that are similar with similar related organizations. But in fact is NORAD and a military response, because China, Cuba, Venezuela, Serbia, some other NATO countries have all attacked America, trying to put people into power and succeeding in putting into power people who were not the will of the American people. Therefore, because the ability to have an honest election in 2026 and 2028 is now threatened and almost certainly will not occur. Remember, it's not just about who's president, it's the down ballot, who's in the House, who's in the Senate. The down ballot is in many ways even more important than the presidency, other than the senior authority of commander-in-chief, which is why the role of President Trump is so critical. With that in mind, in order to protect the contract between the people and their government, the Constitution, President Trump, Commander-in-Chief Trump, will implement a national security emergency. There's various bases, and exactly what he chooses to use as his authorities for declaring that national emergency haven't been completely, fully, exactly expressed yet. But they have options. He has options, and he will do it, because the only way to get where President Trump wants to get to, his first and most important role, as he sees it moving forward, is to return honest elections to the United States, to the American people. And by extension, going to the next step, remember the people that are testifying before grand juries right now here in America, close to where I am this second, here in Florida, the people that are testifying have said they not only cooked the elections in America, 2020 and other elections also, they cooked them in 71 other countries besides the United States. All of those countries have people in leadership at various places within elected positions that are not the will of the people in those countries. And they're working collusively on behalf of their masters, China, Cuba, Venezuela, and other intelligence agency people working through places like Serbia, and characters like John Brennan, precisely, and similar in other countries as well as here in the United States, that they have taken control of and hijacked, like pirates, whole countries across the globe. So when President Trump returns honest elections to America, where you get the person that you actually voted for into office, he also wants to extend that ability to these countries around the world so we get proper governance in other places. We're not having to fight with these globalista and their minions, their puppeted power players. We're getting the actual will of the people in these other countries also, so that we can work together, shoulder up, brother sharpening brother. With all of that said, with all that in mind, preparing for the legal battle just ahead and the hearts and minds battle just ahead, President Trump is going through the steps that lay the groundwork for the American people to understand the context of this decision, issuing a national security emergency, and why it will be exactly what it is when he implements it. That's where we're at this exact second. And by the way, let me just add this one thing, John. It'll come up. One of the issues that's happening today was the tariffs and the Supreme Court's decision that President Trump didn't have the authority to issue tariffs against these other countries. And part of that decision, which I haven't read it yet, but essentially it's that he's picking and choosing who he wants to issue a tariff against based on his own decision framework, decision tree, and advisement, and that it's unique country to country as a foreign policy, and that somehow is not lawful constitutional. Now, what Trump did to respond, and I mentioned this in a couple other shows earlier today, is he then issued a blanket 10% across the board to the world. Well, you'll all pay a tariff then. Now it's not just country by country. Everybody pays a tariff coming in. So the money's going to come in one way or another, and he can do it retroactively and allow it to spread around. What it forces is that countries that may otherwise be our friends and want to work with us to work with those other countries to try and come up with better deals. It's, moving the ball a little bit. The other thing, though, that has to be said, that was Trump's instant response, because he's got options. They make a move, we make a move, they make a move, we make a move. So they made a move, something happened in the courts, Trump's done a response, he's not without options. And there's other things he can do. For example, he can pick and choose who he gives money for military or where he challenges China to have to ante up militarily and cost him money. He has a lot of options that he hasn't played yet. Doesn't mean he has to attack and fight somebody. Just do a build-up somewhere. He can saber rattle. If he can't do it with tariffs, he'll find another way to make other people have to pay to get in this game and challenge what's going on against our markets in the U.S. He's not without options. Relax. He's got things he can do. But beyond all of that, Justice Thomas, a friend, he issued the argument, the dissenting argument against what was said there in the Supreme Court. And everybody here, every last one of you people listening here right now, should go and read the couple-page response from Justice Thomas in the dissenting opinion. It is very precise. It's very clear. He minces no words. What the Supreme Court did in going against President Trump on the tariffs has no basis constitutionally or as a legacy from other actions legally. That this is an unprecedented and anti-constitutional decision on the part of the Supreme Court. Other courts have found exactly the opposite, that President Trump was precisely within his authorities, and Justice Thomas cites actions by President Nixon, which were agreed with and which Congress agreed with. So this is completely unhinged and over the top. Now let me tie it back to elections. Remember During the Biden administration, we got a member of the Supreme Court that was his choice that's anti-Trumper. And by the way, if you go back and look at elections, once you look at 2020, the other thing, and Trump's not without the ability to do this, you want to talk about Epstein and all these other things all the time. What you're going to see is an all-out attack on the legitimacy of President Obama being in office. Also, it's not just going to be about 2020. It's going all the way back to Obama coming into office and who were the players and what was the involvement to cook the vote all the way back to him coming into office, because he's a creation of the CIA.
Yes.
He is a creation of the crowd around Brennan. And so this will take some time. It won't be built out instantly, but you're going to see an attack on that. And then who got into office? Who got into the Supreme Court under Obama? The court, those members of the court who have made a decision that is absolutely in conflict with the Constitution of the United States are going to be challenged not by Trump, but by the election information. And it won't stop at 2020. It's going to take a little time to build this out and the people behind it. Why would you go after Brennan first? Because you want to go after the intelligence agencies. Oh, the CIA has 100 ways to attack you. Don't go after them because they got 100 ways to slice and dice you and take you out if you go after them. Well, you know what? They are front and center, those players within the intelligence agencies, including collaboration, collusion, specifically and precisely going into the City of London and into England, are front and center with what's going to happen next, because not Trump, but people around Trump and people that have been at this for a very long time and gaming this out in a very precise technical way understand if you're going to have a court that's going to be an activist court and it's going to go after the Constitution by issuing decisions like you just had today that are unconstitutional, that are anti-constitutional, then we're going to have to go after those justices and the basis for even getting them into office, which goes back to elections. Elections matter. The people that get on the court
They do.
matter. And if they had
It
their way,
matters.
by the way, if Biden had a second term, if Kamala had been the president, if they won in 2028, they would pack the Supreme Court with a bunch of liberals that would never come to a good decision. They'd have all sorts of options, and you'd lose the core of America over at the Supreme Court. So what President Trump and the team around him are going to do is go after the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. And by the way, although it's not in play right now, it's been shelved. That was the point of the Brunson administration or the Brunson legal action that went before the Supreme Court, and they decided not to hear it. It got docketed, but then they decided not to hear it. That could be pulled out at any point in time. One of the things that's not very well known is within one of the actions, 3 of the Supreme Court justices had to withdraw from any of the decision because of conflicts. Now, there's stuff that's in play that could bring that back as an issue. We are far from done. There's so much drama in the weeks and months ahead, to the point where, let me just say this as a final closing statement here, John. President Trump last week announced to the world at the National Prayer Breakfast that he was calling on Americans, to come to Washington, D.C. on May 17th into the National Mall. He was asking Americans to come there to rededicate America to God, to godliness, to a righteous nation, doing righteous things. That we all show up in prayer before God Almighty to rededicate America. And then beyond that, on the 17th of May, which I hope many of the people in this audience will decide to be present, just like they were there on January 6th. Well over 1 million, probably closer to 2 million people were there on January 6th when an illegal, unlawful, fraudulent election from 2020 was certified by a bought and paid for captured Congress. And with chicanery and magic to seal the deal, to certify an uncertifiable election in 2020, putting Biden into office. That's why the American people were there on January 6, 2021. Now, President Trump is asking for those same people and more to come on May 17th to rededicate ourselves. You know, like couples sometimes redo their vows after they've been married for many years, to, you know, seal the deal again. We do that, but then it doesn't stop there. For the next 49 days, that day inclusive and July 4th, that we be in prayer, 7 times 7. Seven's Trump's number. You know, he became president in the 70th year, 7th month, and 7th day of his life on planet Earth. That was his first full day in office, January 21, the day after the inauguration, January 21 of 2017. 777, he showed up at the office at 7 in the morning and got to work. He kind of likes that number. This 7 times 7 number, 49 days of prayer, of rededicating America, the follow on to that May 17th, which is a Sunday, call to rededication of us as a nation to God and his purposes. What's a godly purpose for the country? To bring lawful governance across the world, that people actually get what America wanted when the Pilgrims came here, not royal families running your life that own everything and you're just a serf, but governance of the people, by the people, for the people. That was what the Pilgrims came here for. That's what people in other countries are praying for. That's what America hopes to ensure for the rest of the world. Honest elections. That is the first and foremost thing that President Trump intends to bring for America and to the world as his legacy. And the second thing, John, which you referenced a couple of times, it's not first, it's second. Honest elections and honest money. Not this paper fiat, not digital fiat, okay, which was a creation of DARPA. Bitcoin was a creation of DARPA. It was going to be as fraudulent as Iraqi dinar and Zim bonds. Sorry if I upset some people within my audience. Excuse me. That was part of
One
a
moment, Juan.
racketeering run.
Just
Go ahead. Yeah.
one moment, sir. With all due respect, I've got some comms coming in. Please stick around, Juan. I want to continue this discussion. I want to follow up, and I would like to talk with you about one last thing before we wrap up the show. I'm getting the understanding that our panel needs to exit to other commitments. Matt Meck, any closing comments before you sign off, sir?
No, John, thank you for the time and the opportunity to be on your show. And I know the last thing you want to get to is aliens.
Yes.
Juan knows a hell of a lot more about that than I do. And so you all are in good hands, even though I am not too far from Area 51.
Well, thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck. General Blaine Holt, are you still with us, sir?
I'm still with you, but I do have to leave. Thank you for the time tonight. And as far as UFOs go, just overlay the UFO incident with all the other crap going on in the country and then ask yourself if it's something you need to worry about. And I'll stop right there.
All right. I want to thank retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt and retired Lieutenant Colonel Juan's Chief of Staff, Mr. Matt Meck. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us and for weighing in on all that incredible information you share with our viewers on the other line of questions before Juan stepped in. Thank you, sir, to our producer. You can bid these gentlemen a good evening. And Juan, please stick around with me. what I'd like, Juan is still with me. I want to make sure Juan is still here.
Yeah, I'm
Yes, he
here,
is.
John.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Juan. I want to jump in. We'll finish off the last line that you were going down, if you recall, and then give me some feedback time, and then we will discuss aliens in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, so let me jump in here, Juan. First off, thank you very much to our viewers. You have just listened to a master class on a variety of critically important current issues and a greater understanding of systems and how they work and how we're maneuvering through these, thanks to our commander-in-chief, his legal team, and on white hats and military, I might add.
So an attack on an election for the purposes of arrests, prosecutions, trials, etc., an attack on the election process in another country is an act of war using a weapon of mass destruction. A country might commit an act of war by attacking a warship inside a country's border, another country's border, or attacking a military base, and not use a weapon of mass destruction. And it would trigger certain legal authorities that raise the bar for a response country to country. But if a country has used a weapon of mass destruction against another country, it raises a different legal threshold for reaction and for prosecution of those guilty in the leadership of a country waging war using a weapon of mass destruction. An attack on the elections by another country, one country to another, is an act of war in the same category as other weapons of mass destruction, which allows for a legally triggered response appropriate to that type of an attack. In other words, as we go through this and we prove who the people were who pulled the trigger on this attack on the American election system, to the extent that we're able to discern who they were, their communications, their authorities to do these different things, we now have the legal ability to go into other countries, grab those people and bring them before an international court and try them for crimes against humanity. Okay? And that's exactly what we're going to do. Most people have not done the mental gymnastics to understand where this is going. So I'm helping your audience kind of get a leg up on this and grasp the magnitude of what's happened to us and what we intend to do in response to it. And it's an education thing for the people to kind of get a hold of these things, understand what it really means. You know, you have 3 million people dead, probably more than that, but at a minimum in Ukraine, and another 5 to 6 million diaspora spread out across the world, probably much more than that. That's just within kind of the official numbers of people who've had to run for their lives and go other places to live and survive because of what happened in Ukraine. That would not have happened that way was Trump in office as president of the United States. And so that is a consequence of an election. There's lots of other things that have also happened as a consequence of Biden being put into power by these fraudsters who stole the 2020 election. And by the way, the media, which is complicit in this because they are bought and paid for, those look at any article that you see, any newscast that you see, where as part of the newscast, they have to add, when President Trump says stolen 2020 election, fraudulent 2020 election, they have to add that this is unproven. It's not true. His false claims of a stolen 2020 election, they're the bought and paid for media being run by these globalista. As soon as you see that line, you know they're working, not just trying to be unbiased, but they're working and bought and paid for by the other side with all their medical ads, with all their retirement ads, etc. That's how they're monetized by this globalist cabal, their financial ads. That is the other side. These are just their functionaries. That's the fight we're in. So it's an information war. So what Trump is going to do, by the way, he's going to put the evidence out there in such a way that even those who currently say those kinds of things, with every article, every newscast concerning the 2020, oh, false, they won't be able to say that anymore. They're going to have to change their speaking or shut up completely, because the people just won't listen to them. Watch what happens next. And the consequence, by the way, of the Supreme Court's action is going to trigger going after the legitimacy of each and every one of those judges to even be in office and issue a decision that is at odds with the Constitution, as Justice Thomas pointed out very, very vehemently.
I want our audience to take, this is what a key summary takeaway that I'd like to focus our audience attention on from Juan's narrative here. So much good information there. Thank you very much, Juan. I want to state this: with this equivalent of a weapon of mass destruction attack against this nation, as well stated by Juan, with all the legality aspects of that as well, you stated a declaration. Look, folks, the odds of this passing through the system that our government is structured in, through the Senate and the Save America Act, are slim to none.
It is not policed by internal policing agencies. It's not going to be administered solely by, let's say, the Justice Department, the FBI, local police departments. It is going to be supervised militarily because it was an act of war. And therefore, everybody is enlisted under the authority within a wartime condition to enforce that we get an honest election. So a bigger gun is being brought to this fight, which is militarily, that any of those jurisdictions that choose to fight with President Trump over whether or not he has the authority to do this, that might otherwise want to go to a court and get a courtroom decision like what just happened today with the Supreme Court to stop Trump. When he declares a national security emergency exists, we have been attacked by an enemy, by countries outside of the United States. We are in a state of war with people who have attacked us within the election arena. Declaring a national security emergency in that context allows him to militarily back this up, and it suspends the ability of any state or any internal jurisdiction to challenge his authority using any court, including the Supreme Court, because we are in a wartime setting, and he has this authority to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, all the way to a Supreme Court justice. It will be one of the most controversial things to ever happen on planet Earth, let alone America. But in order to protect us moving forward is absolutely critical and necessary. And that's why taking the time that I have to explain this to your audience, virtually no other audiences out there have heard it as I'm trying to explain it to you. Now, this audience and similar can do the mental gymnastics, look at what I've said, think about what others may say similar, and they can weigh it out and see if I'm right, and see if this is where President Trump is going, and if he's doing it logically with good cause, and his advisors are moving him, the ones that you don't see, not the ones that are visible, are moving him in the right direction because it's what's needed to protect the Constitution and the American people. If your Constitution isn't going to be enforced, including by the Supreme Court, remember, those tariffs are there to protect the American people from an attack within our jobs. We're being attacked by China using slave labor to displace the productive capacity of America out to the world as well as internally. And so what's having to happen is that the tariffs are being used to protect American jobs. And that slave labor is being imported into America by those people that want to destroy America. That's why part of what President Trump is doing is to remove those people that are brought here to work at far lower wages as an occupying army in order to protect the existing American citizenry. And by the way, let me add one quick thing before I forget it here, John. And this is really, really, really important. For many people, they're sitting out there, they're pontificating, well, those people need to live too. And they like, look, they've come in through the back door, the side door, the window, whatever. They didn't come through the front door. We have to be able to regulate that population coming in so that it doesn't overwhelm and displace our existing population, hijack our country. As President Trump removes or begins to reindustrialize America, which is what the intent of the tariffs is, as we get mining and raw resources flowing again from inside the United States, our raw resources of production, as we get the industrial base spooled back up, building things here in America and creating jobs for young Americans and places for older Americans to return into the workforce and get to work. As we reinvent and reconstitute America and get us back on track again, what happens is that we're a machine. We need more people. We will want, as we get turned back on, as Reagan said, the business of America is business. As we get things working again correctly, we're going to want people to once again come here from the rest of the world and go through the process to be citizens. And in some occasions, they don't want to be a citizen, but there's work that we want them here for, and we're willing to do and give them the green card, let them work because they have skills that we can use that will help America. Get them in here. Many of those people who are leaving the country understand right now that if they get picked up by ICE and sent out of the country, they go onto a list and they're never allowed to come back to America ever again because they had to be deported to get them out of here. They made us go to that expense and trouble. You're gone. You can't come back the rest of your life. I don't care that you have kids here that were born here. I don't care that you have assets and resources. You're gone. You're out. Done. Because you made us deport you. Those that are self-deporting, and there's many, and I've talked about this with even one of my friends that turns out he was here. I didn't know he was illegal alien. He worked here, did stuff around for 20 years, his whole family. He called me up, had a problem, concern over a year ago, and we talked. And I said, if you get deported, you'll never be able to come back. Your kids, if they get deported, they'll never get to come back. He self-deported, went back to Mexico. His extended family had a couple other countries that they were also from besides Mexico. They've all gone back. I just found out 3 or so days ago that one of his kids has already been accepted to come back within a student visa situation, and that others look like they're going to be able to come back shortly also. And this son, who was born in Mexico but raised here, is going to go through the process to become a citizen, and he's doing it through the front door. As America turns back on again, a lot of these people that came in the wrong way, if they self-deport themselves, understand they're going to get a chance to come in. The sooner you leave, which he left last year with the kids, almost exactly a year ago. They're already in the process to become able to come back in through the front door. Others need to think similarly, and it's an enticement to others, even within the community, that they can communicate, hey, I'm here, I'm coming back in legitimately, I don't have to, look over my shoulder, and I'm going to go through the process. We need all of those, because as the jobs turn back on, we're going to need a lot of these people to be able to come in here and work those jobs. We will have more work in America than we have Americans to do it right now. So we will be opening our arms, as America has classically done, to the rest of the world. You don't have to come here as an illegal. You can come here, we'll put you on a visa. You can come here, you want to become an American citizen, there's a process, and we're going to want you. But you gotta leave self-deport and come in through the front door. And that's exactly what's going to happen. With the tariffs, Trump protects American industry, protects the American workers against foreign attacks using slave labor and stolen technology. And we're going to become the place to go for people that really want to produce and do things. And it's going to be healthier for us. It's going to be better for those that want to come here but come through the front door. All those people leaving need to understand that for themselves, their kids, their legacy. This is a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. And it does start with tariffs to turn America back on again. All goes hand in hand.